Hi, everyone. How are you all doing this evening? Marcia here with CS Bite and a Mouthful. This evening, I'm coming to you because we're going to be wrapping up our topic of taking the dis out of disability and instead focusing on abilities. It's interesting because when you're doing certain topics, then it allows you to do some research. And as I did some research, I realized that disabilities comes in two stages. You have the visible and you have the invisible. Whilst we can identify the visible um, disadvantages, trying to not use disability, um, it is quite easy for us to identify the obvious. But what about the invisible ones? Some invisible disability may not be obvious, but they can still wreak havoc on individuals' ability to carry out the task of day-to-day life. By some estimate, as much as 10% of the American population suffers from a hidden disability that makes daily life difficult and sometimes painful. 96% of all people living with a chronic illness suffers of symptoms that are invisible to the naked eyes. While some may be able to hide their disabilities and carry on with daily living, many others struggle with day-to-day activities. And when we look at the 10 most common invisible disabilities, um, included in those 10 major ones are chronic pains, mental illness, fibromyalgia, whatever, chronic fatigue syndrome, traumatic brain injury, Crohn's disease, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, Lyme disease, post-traumatic stress disorder. The term invisible disability covers a wide range of medical conditions, many of which are neurological. This makes it difficult to detect by simply looking at someone. In fact, people with invisible disabilities are often accused of faking their conditions. Hmm. Simply because their illnesses or medical conditions aren't visible enough. Many of these disabilities require the expert eyes of a physician or advanced diagnostic techniques to be able to effectively diagnose. Despite their invisibility, these disabilities can have a profound effect on an individual's ability to carry out day-to-day work duties. Invisible conditions can include anything from chronic illnesses to diabetes and sleep disorders, even though you can see them. You can't see them. They have powerful effects on one's quality of life. While the effects of invisible disability can be tremendous for the sufferers, others may find it difficult to recognize or acknowledge their disability. And so we have joining us this evening someone who can speak about an invisible disease that does maybe all of what we just spoke about, the chronic pains, the this, the that, you know. And so I'll introduce you all to none other than Mrs. Melanie Grant Moss. Hi, Melanie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you so much for joining me. And Melanie is you want to tell them for yourself, Melanie?
I am a certified patient advocate with a company that I created called Patients with Patients of America. And I am an advocate for sickle cell patients. Sickle cell patients experience chronic illness, and I too have sickle cell disease. So that's basically how I'm able to understand the patient, relate to the patient, and have a one-on-one experience as a liaison with patients and providers.
Okay. All right. And so next I have someone who, when all of these problems come about, a lot of times, a lot of families are not equipped to deal with what is happening. A lot of these things can have psychological effect, or both, not just on the sufferer, but on patients and family. And so, this other person that I'm going to be introducing you to is also an advocate in her own right. And so, I present to you Miss Zephyr Ambrose. Hi.
Hi there.
Thank you for joining me and for accepting my invitation to this
Oh, of
platform
course.
this evening. So, can you just tell our listeners who you are, what you do briefly, and why you have decided to take up my invitation to be here this evening?
Sure. So my name is Zapier Ambrose. In my current line of work, I'm outpatient mental health therapist. So I meet with adults, children, and families pre-COVID in the home, in the school, in the community, trying to meet their needs as best as they can in whatever format they're available. I work with families, children, and adults. So kind of the disabilities run the gamut of things as PTSD, anxiety, schizophrenia. The list is there's no end. And so just kind of joining the conversation as an advocate for those
Mhm.
who are suffering with some of those kind of unseen, sometimes unbelieved realities of mental health disabilities.
Okay, so let me prod you a little bit further.
Sure.
I know there's not much you can really divulge because of confidentiality, but how easily, as you said, these are things that people tend to think that some of them are make believe.
Mm-hmm.
But how easily do you find families, especially parents, um, jumping into that acceptance role? Because it's easier that someone jumps into that acceptance role and stop being in denial. It's better for the person, the patient. How easily do you come across persons who are willing to really accept that yes,
Um,
there is a
honest,
chance, there's a
it's
problem?
it's it's so case by case. Oftentimes, it has a lot to do with why the acceptance isn't there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of times, not a lot of times. Some of the times I've seen it could be a cultural thing sometimes in which some cultures mental health is very taboo,
Mm-hmm.
and so to be able to, whether it's cultural or whether it's religious based, those are where I find the most resistance and the most pushback.
Mm-hmm.
um, I think sometimes I, if I had to wait for acceptance from every parent or guardian, it would halt a lot of my work. So I think sometimes the best way to get acceptance is honestly just to begin the work and let some of the results speak for themselves. I think when parents and guardians start seeing some change and some betterment in their situation, they're more readily able to accept the help.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes depending on the severity of the ailments, some people will get on board quickly just for that sense of relief. So again, it's definitely family by family, and it's very much dependent on why there's that wall or that block in the first place. But more often than not, we're able to work through it one way or another. A lot
Okay.
of education goes into that.
Okay. So I have joining me online Andre, and Andre is a nutritionist. She is a health um, advocate. She's a nutritionist, and she has decided to join us this evening because we started out this program looking at autism and other related. And as we go along, we get to understand, as I did more reading and delve into, different conditions, how important nutrition is to patients. So I reached out to Andre, and sure enough, although she had a long day of traveling, she's here with me this evening. So let me just introduce her to the stream.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, Andre, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
It's
I've got 4 kids, and a bunch of them are on their Zoom, homework classes and poking at me. So forgive me if I every once in a while turn away, but uh, very happy to be able to join you guys and to listen in and to see how I can give any help.
Thank you so much. And don't worry, you can even bring the kids on stream at some point if you don't mind.
Luckily, right now they're all at the table doing some homework before I have to feed them. So I was like, oh, this is a good time. Perfect.
Oh, okay, great. All right. So I'll come right back to you, Andre, to ask you to fit in. But let me just ask Melanie a question. Melanie, you said you were actually born with the sickle cell disease.
Yes.
Can you kind of give us a brief synopsis into your life thus far? Some of the I know that nothing. I know that you're a hurdler. I know that you overcome every challenge. But can
Yes.
you just tell persons who are watching, viewing, um, don't have any experience with what sickle cell might have been like, what you have had to endure, all these times, and
Yes. Um, so dealing with sickle cell disease through my life, I've been able to get better at handling the disease.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a pain-based disease, meaning that it's purely the main factor of the disease is causing pain. It causes pain because of those cells clumping together in the veins, and it's triggered by everything. I think it's like every little thing, but it's really mainly when it's too cold, wintertime, it's triggered if I'm living in a cold climate. As a child, I lived in New York. It was extremely cold, and I would be hospitalized quite often due to the fact that the climate has changed so drastically. When it's snowing outside, that would bring on what we call a crisis in the world of sickle cell disease and sickle cell anemia. So when I do have a crisis, it's the only thing that can help it is fluids and pain medication at the time that I'm going through the disease process. And eventually it goes away in its own time. Sometimes I would need a blood transfusion so that I could speed up the process of allowing the healthier red blood cells to circulate through my body, to give me oxygen, to allow the pain to subside, allow the cells to not clump together so much.
Mm-hmm.
So it's debilitating my life, being that it is triggered by the weather, it is triggered by high altitude, it's also triggered by immense stress. Over my life, I'm 38 now, but as a child, dealing with it, not being able to overexert myself in sports. As a kid, that's a lot of my patients, because I'm an advocate, a lot of my patients cannot play certain sports. If they do play certain sports, they have to modify what they do. Their exercises have to be modified.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Anywhere from as a teenager, going through life and wanting to accomplish certain things and be a part of certain activities, as long as it doesn't hinder the health and can cause a crisis and not too stressful, children can do it. I chose that since I couldn't join the track team per se and and run track, I became the manager of the track team, and I would still travel with them. I still go everywhere, everywhere they went, and I would still be a part, but I just couldn't, run the hurdles that I wanted to and do all of the exercises and the, the 50-yard dash and the 100-yard dash. I couldn't I couldn't be a part of that, but I'd still find a way to be incorporated into it. and
Okay.
and that's when you talk about overcoming the challenges. You may not be able to do, certain things, but you can kind of try and, just push the bar. I'm good for pushing the bar as far as I can until I can't. So I will do things that my mom, through my life would say, "Oh, don't do that." She's fearful of me getting sick, but I would still do it to try and see how far it really can go before it would
You're
be
just pushing
detrimental.
that extra button,
The
right?
extra button. And sometimes, I don't get sick for the most part if I do it, and if I'm really good about managing my health before I do something
Mm-hmm.
that's, overexerted, then I would more than likely not, have such a bad crisis. But I do have to watch everything I do. So it does hinder me. Also, talking about the part where you go into the hospital and you
Mm-hmm.
may have a physician that may not believe that you're really in pain, and maybe they may not believe that your pain is that severe.
Mm-hmm.
They say, well, what's your pain scale 1 to 10, and you tell them it's a 9, or you tell them it's a 10. They'll be
Mm-hmm.
like, but you look too nice. How are you in so much pain? You look too good to be sick.
Mm-hmm.
But because I'm not going to dress like I'm, you know, like a, like I'm just this ill person on the street. So, sometimes you have that perception of people not realizing, like, how is it that she can do all of these things and still have this disease? And
Mm-hmm.
it's really and truly, in my adult life, I was able to get on a proper regimen, find a good physician that could keep me on a healthy path, so that if I do get sick, it's not something that will take me out, weeks on end. It will, probably I'll be sick for 3 days, 4 days, and then after it's over, I'm back to normal. And
Question.
normalcy, maintaining normalcy is the best thing I could say.
Okay. So, question to you, because we have Andre here and we want
Hmm.
to put her into the mix. Have
Yes.
you found that nutrition, diet have been helpful in this? And then ask Andre to come on with her expertise.
Have I or Andre?
Have you found that that does help?
Yes, actually, recently there's certain things that we've been looking into that can increase the blood level. So
Mm-hmm.
drinking beet juice. There, I have another advocate, a friend of mine, and he literally completely changed his entire diet. He's not 100% vegan, but if you do change your diet, and if you do create a space where you're putting into your body foods that can increase and boost your metabolism and increase certain levels, as far as your blood level, as far as providing oxygenation, keeping your heart healthy, then yes, nutrition is a big part.
Okay. So, Andre, here I
Yeah.
come to you
Okay.
because I've seen you work miracles with kids with autism, with ADHD, because I was with you for a period of time.
Right.
Um, can I just ask you just to touch on some of the areas that you have worked with and how you have been able to guide families and patients into a better, healthier lifestyles through your health and nutrition program? And can you tell us a little bit about the program as well?
Well, the first thing is that I have worked with people from all different venues of health issues. And for Shadnura, pas me déranger, je suis sur le téléphone. Oui, c'est à moi. Oui. I told you I have a lot of kids that are going to interrupt me. So I've dealt with people from all different types of health issues, and and one of the questions before I go into all the different types of things that I've dealt with different people is when you mentioned that you, for example, went to the hospital and the doctor said, "What is your pain level?" and you said it's a 9 or a 10. What is the description of your pain? Is it like a burning feeling going through your veins?
Um, I At the highest level, the pain feels like And this is a question. It's so hard to describe because it's a question my mom asks me all the time, and
Right.
I try to give her as best description as I can. The pain at its highest feels like my sockets of my arms and legs and limbs are coming off, or they're being sawed off with
Wow.
a saw.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how
Okay.
severe the
Okay.
pain can get.
And you mentioned something uh, about green juices, and then you also mentioned about getting oxygen to your blood.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if anyone has ever told you, but first of all, when you do green juices, you can't be going to like Whole Foods and buying these green juices that have been pasteurized.
Pasteurized,
If
yeah.
they've been pasteurized, then you are getting zero benefit. It has to be cold pressed.
Okay.
And, or like another machine that's really great is like the Breville machine, and it's not as good quality as some of the other machines out there. But the difference is that like the Norman Walker machine, it's 3,500, and then the Breville is like $275.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally myself use the Breville because it is so user friendly. But the bad thing about it is that you must drink the juice immediately
Immediately, yeah.
because it spins at a high frequency, and so when something spins at a high frequency, you're really only getting 70% of the nutrients and the enzymes. And someone like you, for example, it's really important to get like the kale, the Swiss chard, the dandelion. Dandelion is very good for your liver detox.
Mm-hmm.
And you want those dark leafy greens, but not fruits. Like, for example, if you're going to put a fruit in there, you could put a green apple, but not fruits. A lot of people use way too much
Way
fruit
too much
because
fruits.
you mentioned that your blood needs oxygen. And how do you do that? You have to alkaline your blood. And one of the reasons why, since you're a little girl, that it would be so painful in your body, and they probably didn't even realize it, that they were giving you all these foods that were very acidic, which means
Yeah.
junk foods, and then that would cause your system to go crazy. And then when the system is very acidic, whatever issue you have, it just accelerates it. But when you alkaline, then it brings oxygen to the blood, and therefore anything that's trying to live in the system starts to die because it cannot survive in alkalinity. And based on like what I've done, the kind of work, and what the first question that was asked to me, um, for example, like cancer patients, or just somebody who's very healthy, the first thing we do is we always want to detox the system. So what does that mean? It means that you want to be able to put the system into like a sleeping mode for about 5 days, and you wind up doing a protocol that would consist of a lot of fiber, like every, let's say, 3 hours, with like, let's say, water and a little fresh apple juice or a green juice. Like every 2 to 3 hours you're drinking liquids. And that's another thing you mentioned. I was listening to you and you said you had to drink a lot of liquids
Fluids.
to
A
make you
lot
feel
of
good.
fluids. Yeah.
And I was wondering, what kind of fluids were you drinking? Because that's really important.
Juice.
Somebody like you
Yeah.
has to drink tons of
Tons
water
of fluids.
so that the blood is like flowing, and lots of green juices. But if you're drinking things like orange juice and apple juices,
Apple juice
things
is
like
what I
that,
always drink.
it's too acidic. Yeah, it's just too acidic. And so just be careful with that you want to make sure that, as much as possible, drink a lot of water and get those green, freshly squeezed juices. I don't know where you live, but there is a
Florida.
company. Oh, Florida. I just came back from Florida, as a matter of fact. When I spoke with Marcy, I was in Florida when I spoke to her. Now I flew in today. So if you were in New York, I'd say go to Juice Press, because they make everything raw, organic, and cold press, and it lasts for 3 days. But there are some places or some whole foods that do carry the cold pressed green juices. The
Okay.
only thing I have noticed in Florida is they put a lot of fruits in their green
Fruits
juice.
and yeah.
Yeah, it's no good.
Yeah.
I guess
And
they're
so
using what they have, right?
no, what it is that
The
they want to
taste.
sell those green juices, and they
Hmm.
just don't know how to make a really good green juice because they're so worried that the people are going to be like, "Ooh, this is too
No
bitter."
taste.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, but if they would just, if they would just add like a green apple and a lemon, oh my God, But the way I make my green juices is kale, dandelion, Swiss chard, celery, cucumber,
Mm-hmm.
and then I add a lemon and like let's say because I usually make a drink for 6 people. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll add, let's say, like 3 green apples because I make like about 10 cups of green juice, and my kids drink it since they're little babies. And
Oh,
they drink it up like within, we have contests that it has to be drank within 2 to 3 minutes.
minutes.
And yeah, because the reason for that is you don't want to clean up your machine. You want to drink it right down. And so that you get all those nutrients and the enzymes.
Okay.
And that is live food and it alkalines the system. So then,
Hmm.
so then whenever you have like those pains going on in your system,
Yeah.
that will quiet all that down because it's alkalinity. Alkalinity is oxygen, you know? And definitely the more raw like salads that have everything that you can think of, some chopped up broccoli, cauliflower, celery, radishes, cucumbers, little tomatoes, carrots, kale, uh, arugula. The more of that you eat, the more, again, you're putting oxygen into your system. The more cooked food you eat, because you mentioned vegan, but
Vegan. Yeah.
vegan, a lot of it cooked food too.
It's cooked food. Yeah.
So you need a lot of your raw foods to get the nutrients. And one other thing that I picked up with you is your thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the thyroid needs minerals and it needs natural iodine. And how do you get that? You get that by eating either a ton of seaweed, which most people don't like.
Yeah.
So
But
there's,
the seaweed chips, I've seen seaweed chips and things like
yeah,
that.
yeah, but the seaweed
Is that
chips,
really good or
I
what?
mean, yeah, they're
I
good
see
as
them.
a snack, but I can tell you that the amount of seaweed that you need every day is,
Hmm.
you're gonna, it's not, it's, the seaweed in a chip is not just
Mm-hmm. It's
seaweed.
not
It's got
enough. Yeah.
other fried
Other
little things in
additives.
there. So it's not the additives, but it's like it's not just seaweed. It's got something in there, and lots of times, sometimes it's baked, sometimes it's fried. So you have to be
Hmm.
careful with that. But there is a company called Now, Now, and there's a product called Thyro, Thyro Mend, MEND, and
Hmm.
basically all it is just a bunch of minerals and iodine from the seaweed chopped up. And because I give my kids all of this all the time, and they've just now started to be able to swallow like these little pills.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, there's a company that makes like a cream that is pure seaweed, basically turned into a cream, and we would put it on the throat right
In
here.
the
So
throat. Yeah.
for the first 6 years of their life, I did that every day. Just put a little
Mm-hmm.
drop to make sure, because unfortunately, in our diet, for all of us, by the way, we don't get enough iodine, and for the thyroid, and that the thyroid is your gas pedal to your engine. So that's another thing I picked up from you
Yeah.
very strongly. That oh
And I did have a thyroid test. I know this is turning in. Sorry, Marcia. This is turning into a whole session.
Yes.
they, so they
But
checked your T3
but
and your
they did
T4.
check the thyroid, and they did say that my thyroid was okay. Like there was no you know,
Right.
but
There was
still,
nothing
I'm
major
getting
going on
older.
or anything.
Right. I'm
But
getting older. So, I'll be
Mhm.
but
turning
I
39. So I still need to keep, make sure because it could change.
All right.
sorry,
So,
I've got a
so
kid
Yeah.
crying.
Andre,
Roll it
I,
back in,
I need
Marcia.
to before you go. I just want to ask you. I'm gonna let Darcy, our attorney, is here with us now. But while I'm gonna let her in, I just want to ask you for like persons who have like children with like ADHD, whatever other disabilities there are out there, that
Yes.
whatever.
Which I've
How
dealt
would
with
you?
my own kids. I had those issues.
Mhm. How do you recommend? What would you recommend for them? And with that, I will let Darcy in. Oh, did I lose Andre? I think okay. So let me let Darcy into the stream for now.
Hi,
Hi,
everyone.
Darcy.
Hello. How are you guys doing?
Good, thanks. Thank you so much for joining me. I know you're only giving me about 15 minutes today, right?
Yes.
This program is very interesting because we are talking about taking the dis out of disabilities and instead to focus on abilities. And as I said earlier on, when I spoke to you 2 weeks ago, and Zephyr is quite familiar with the case that I'm mentioning, not by name, but you know, what happened is that this lady, as a matter of fact, yesterday was the 15th year anniversary. She had a she had a son who was um, basically turning 22 in a couple of days. And he was pretty much ambushed in a car park, shot in the back of the head. So now he is in a total vegetarian state. So we were talking on one of our programs, and she was talking about, having now to negotiate to get the legal rights to become his total guardian. So I just want to talk about the issue of how important it is for one to have a will, especially a living will, and in addition to that, just any kind of legal advice that you are able to give our viewers out there who might either have someone in a similar position or just an advice that you can give someone just in case pre-adventure something similar happens, or just to give to the regular person like you and I about the importance of having a will and why.
Sure. My pleasure.
And thank you so much, Darcy, for just hopping on. I so greatly appreciate
No,
all of you being here this evening. And therefore, I'm going to be coming back to you right after this,
Sure.
Darcy. All right.
so thank you for having me. Again,
Yeah.
I'm Darcy Thompson. I'm an attorney based in New Jersey and New York. So estate planning is extremely important because if you don't have an estate plan, the state law will decide who gets your assets when you pass away.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
um, estate planning is beneficial because you decide how your estate will be distributed. You get to decide who's going to take care of any minor children that you may have. You will avoid a lengthy probate process, and you get to decide who will wind up the affairs of your estate. So my advice is that it doesn't matter really how old you are. Everyone should have a will, a last will and testament.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on 1 second. I think I lost you.
We're right here.
Right back. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I would say in terms of the necessary estate documents that you need, you definitely need a last will and testament, no matter how old you are. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that essentially allows you to do the things that I just said. You can
Mm-hmm.
define your assets. You can name specific beneficiaries. You can decide
Mm-hmm.
guardians for your minor children and appoint an executor that will wind up your affairs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you die without a will, probate court makes all these decisions.
Can you spoke about appointing executors, especially for those of us with minor children. Can you kind of say what would be some of the things that you need to look at to appoint a good executor? Because there are many persons who have appointed executors And, after that person has passed, it's just like total chaos. What are some of the things we need to avoid, and what are some of the things we need to look for in these persons?
You definitely need to use your discretion. It needs to be someone that you trust, because essentially they're going to be responsible for children and for how all of your estates are divided up. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say it really depends. It really depends upon the person. It's different in every situation. But you would designate someone who's close to you, someone who you would trust with your life.
Or with your assets, right?
Your assets, your children, your life, essentially. So
Mm-hmm.
the last will and testament is just one document. I would also suggest that you get a power of attorney document. So that's
Mm-hmm.
a legal document that will allow you to appoint an agent to act for you in the event that you're becoming incapacitated. So the story you told me, um, the the son was still alive, but he was in a vegetative position. So then,
Mm-hmm.
if you have a power of attorney, that person would be able to handle all of your decisions, your financial, legal decisions, and they would act on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also important that you pick a trusted individual to act in that capacity. I know that you mentioned a living will, so I would say that you can decide whether or not you'd like a living will or whether you'd like a healthcare proxy, which is also known as an advance directive.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is, so they're both in a situation where the person is incapacitated, or pretty much they're both in a situation where a living will is where a person would designate their own wishes in the event that they're incapacitated.
Mm-hmm.
They would, this document allows them to specify what kind of future medical care and treatments that they do and do not want if they're
Mm-hmm.
able to communicate due to
Right.
type of illness or incapacity. But on the other hand, the healthcare proxy / advance directive allows
Mm-hmm.
you to appoint another individual to make these decisions for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference between the living will and the healthcare directive. Sometimes
Okay.
it's beneficial to have the healthcare directive, because if you have the living will, it may be done years in advance, and you may not have the foresight to see what's going to happen,
And and
when the emergency occurs. Whereas if you have the healthcare directive, that person can make decisions at that moment for you.
mm-hmm. Question though, do you find that persons really take a living will, power of attorney, all these things? Do you find that people are taking advantage of these things the way they should?
To be honest, I think that in our community specifically, people don't have these documents in place most of the time. We kind of usually, and I'll say even from our own family situation, sometimes we wait until it's too late and, the person is nearly on their deathbed and they have to execute these documents.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes an emergency because in the event that you pass without this stuff, your bank account is frozen. Your loved ones may not be able to bury you. They may not have the funds to pay your mortgage payments, and they don't have access to your money and your assets to continue your affairs, and that may lead to their detriment. So I think a lot of people don't think about what happens after you pass away, and it doesn't matter if you're like 25, if you're elderly, you have assets, you definitely want to be able to determine how they are, who they're given to after you pass away.
How can we better educate? Because I know for a lot of other nations, I mean, this is something that I hear being discussed in household with children and stuff like that. But these are things that, as people of color, we don't do certain things. A lot of people figure, why am I going to be talking about a will? I'm not going to die for now. They feel that if they talk about certain things, they're pulling death down on themselves. How can we better educate? Do you think there's a forum that we can do? on, a similar kind of setting like this where we each try to reach out to different communities and try to pull people in to sort of educate? How do we really educate our people, Darcy?
I've thought kind of along the ways, but I've kind of thought along the way of like church, of going into churches and kind
Mm-hmm.
of disseminating the information like that, because then it will reach a wide variety of ranges of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of hard to take the stigma out of a will because nobody wants to think about death. I'm not quite sure, to be honest, but I would start with churches, I think.
Yes, because we are big on our churches, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think maybe we should. And I definitely will partner with you or anyone else, however I can, to bring awareness to more of our people so that we can be better educated to make educated decisions. Because I'm just tired of seeing, us dying. We don't have anything proper in place, and then the entire family just become now like cats and dogs because no proper anything was made. And so this person wants that and this person think that they are entitled to that, and we're not all of a sudden everything just goes through the window. The closest of families that you can find when someone dies, just
It's
because
all over.
we can't agree on how to whatever, then it's all over. I
I
mean,
would say it would start in the household. The adults need to make sure that they have a will so that they can lead by example.
Yes.
Because, of course, like you said, when someone passes away, it's mayhem. But if people have their affairs in order, those individuals who are mad, they really can't say anything. And maybe they'll take heed and follow that example, so to protect themselves and their beneficiaries.
so Zafira, let me ask you something because you are into health, and mental and all of that. I don't know if in your line of work, do people, I mean, because people are coming to you for advice and everything. Do you have families that, reach out to you and ask you if there's any recommendation you can give or any advice that you can give in cases like this?
No, that's nothing that's ever necessarily come up for me. I know as, if I'm thinking about it, I know as part of like, and honestly, I'm not even sure why it exists, but it's just
Mhm,
one of those kind of standard forms you fill out when we're doing treatment planning.
mhm,
But one of the standard questionnaires on there is, do you have an advance directive? And
mhm.
if not, do you need help with one?
Right.
Um, and again, I'm not sure how that, and maybe this is something that Darcy might know. I'm not sure how that plays into the mental health aspect of things,
Mhm.
other than maybe like when it comes to like confidentiality or records releases after somebody passes away. Um, but the short of that question just happening to be on an evaluation questionnaire,
Mhm.
that's not necessarily something I feel like I've ran into, because again, I don't know how much people necessarily consider mental health after someone may pass away.
Wow. But I mean, in your case, because you're working with mental health,
Mhm.
I mean, as well as other persons, what about when that person is now diagnosed that this person can no longer manage their affairs? And so it's either that the family or the state is going to now come in to be in charge of that individual because mentally they're not in a position to make decisions.
Hmm.
So I mean, how do how does this tie in any way, shape, or form to your job? You're saying in no way? Or is
Not
it
that,
that is
yeah,
it
not
that
that it's a no way, but I think that brings up a couple of good points. It's just a no way that I've personally had to deal with thus far.
right?
Um,
So it's
I
maybe
couldn't,
now.
right. I can imagine, again, I could imagine it may have something to do with the release of records for maybe situations like you're saying, where maybe mental capacity or impairment might come into play if somebody is trying to, become responsible for somebody's affairs. I could see that being somehow tied in, but it's just nothing that's come. I would say, so I come from a child welfare background. So most of my career, I've worked with young children. And so that's really where my specialty lies. So even in my current position, I would say 80% of my clients are under 18.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how imperative it is for them at that point, but like you said, you brought up a good point in how that might tie into one another.
Okay. Because at 18, your charges, at what age are they out of your care? Is it 18 or 21?
In a mental health aspect?
Well, overall in the government, what if situation?
So I work with children and adults. So it's not necessarily that they'd be out of my reach or anything. I still provide services to 40-year-olds. So it's not necessarily a matter of me no longer being able to be in reach.
Okay. So there's no age group that they max out of your care.
Not in my current
Okay.
position, no.
Okay. All right. So Darcy, thank you so much for hopping on with us. Is there
My
anything you would want to share with us before you go, including sharing your contact information, the kind of law you practice, and how you can be reached? Anyhow,
Yeah.
you can be reached.
Yes, so I'm a solo practitioner. My law firm is Thompson Consulting, attorney at law. There I specialize in real estate law. I also specialize in contract drafting and review, including drafting wills, power of attorney, and advance directive. I can be reached at my email address. It's my first name, Darcy, at thompsonconsultinglaw.com. Or my website, thompsonconsultinglaw.com.
Thank you so much,
Thanks
Darcy.
for having
I
me.
really appreciate it. And thank you so much for hopping on.
No
And
problem.
we'll definitely keep in touch. All right.
Hey, you guys have a good rest of your evening.
Bye. Have
Thank
a nice
you so
evening.
much. Nice to you. Bye-bye. Okay, guys. So Andre's still with us, but I guess she is going to give attention to maybe one of the, how many kids does she have? One of the four, or so I presume she'll be back with us. So, Zephyr,
Yep.
can you just tell us a little bit more about your work? You were saying that you had kind of changed positions over some recent times. Can you tell us what you did prior and what you do now, the difference between them, and
Yeah.
why you chose in the first place to be in this profession?
Sure. So I started out my profession in child welfare services. So I worked with, and my specific role in that agency was I worked with children who were already removed from their parents. I would say that the cases I dealt with were a mix between children who were living with suitable family members, or if that wasn't an option, they were in foster care. So I worked with children and families who were out of the home already in trying to provide services to best meet the children's needs, and then also services to help remedy whatever the parents' issues may have been to bring those children into care. Sometimes those services work, sometimes parents are really motivated, and sometimes they're not. And then I stopped doing that about 2000, I want to say 2019. And I transitioned into the role I am now, which is a mental health therapist for children, families, and adults. I love child welfare. I miss child welfare a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something to be said about working with families who most of the time want nothing to do with you. And so change is really hard, and it doesn't always stick when it's kind of forced upon you. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to try and get into a role where families were open to work. I mean, the families that I work with now are all referring themselves or being referred by schools, and
Mm-hmm.
they're at a point of their lives where change is necessary and they're willing to accept it, rather than trying to kind of force change on families between lawyers and the court and risk of
Mm-hmm.
losing children. I mean, that's not necessarily the most effective way to promote change in families. So again, just wanted to continue helping with that family dynamic in one way or another, but thought I might have better luck when, you know, when I wasn't necessarily the bad guy in every situation.
Question to you though. How has motherhood caused you now to look at both roles? I'm sure it has. I'm
I
sure it has
recall
brought you.
I
Go ahead.
recall in my previous work, so in child welfare, I do recall kind of maybe some of the more experienced mothers, or maybe some of the more people who had children kind of often, they'd have children and then all of a sudden they'd be gone. And they're like, this is not a job you can do when you have kids. I'm like, I don't really get it.
Mm-hmm.
The stories you hear are awful. I don't imagine how they could be any more awful just because you have kids. I was wrong. I was totally wrong. So I definitely, many of my friends still work for the agency. And so
Mm-hmm.
kind of hearing things from them and just different stories you see on the news even, or just even movies and commercials that I happen to run into. I feel like with having my own kind of kid and trying to process how some people behave towards kids and how some people, I guess, manage parenthood. It seems to hit home much more than in a very different way than it had before.
Tell me something. Do you think that a lot of the cases that you're seeing, because you spoke about ways that you can't imagine, parenting, do you think that a lot of these are coming from parents' own upbringing? Do you think it's something that they have adopted because that's all they know?
I definitely, I've seen, so to be fair, I think I've seen both ends of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I did work with the primary goal of the unit that I was in is trying to keep children, if not with their parents, at least with some kind of relative, to reduce the amount of trauma from being removed from your nuclear family.
Right.
Sometimes that went really well. Sometimes there were, in the situation where where you met me from, I guess in that situation it went tremendously. There was a family member who was capable and supportive and protectant of the child, and so in a lot of cases that can work.
Hmm. Okay, Mel, she has some. Let me
Technical.
see. What what is that?
Maybe
Nina,
her
I'm not going to
internet.
remove her because she is coming back. So Mel, tell me more about. Okay, so you gave us a synopsis of your years growing up. What made you so persistent? What made you believe that whatever adversities there were, that you could overcome them?
I would say, okay, so there's a couple of things. I think a great support system for me
Mm-hmm.
helped a lot because I had people around me that were achievers,
Mm-hmm.
who who were working class parents that, you know, they did whatever it took to, you know, strive for what they wanted out of life.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing that allowed me to want to have a ambition to do more, you know, and not kind of allow my disease to control my life. So I think the support that I had around me had a lot to do with shaping my mind and
Mm-hmm.
what I wanted to do with my life. Also, when you see people around you attain,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's friends in school, attain and achieve, you know, family, attain and achieve,
Mm-hmm.
that notion of doing that and being able to create that environment was definitely something. Oh, she's back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Doing something that I definitely did not want to be left behind, you know. I
Mm-hmm.
was definitely in the mindset of I didn't want anything to hold me back from being
Okay.
able to attain and achieve too. So I think that
You
along with
wanted to create your own wave. You wanted to
mhm,
ride your own
I
waves.
want to ride my own wave. Everybody, you know, can attain things and achieve things. And it's like, oh, it's such an accomplishment for them. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
we're so proud of them. I mean, just, and it didn't have to even be in my own house or my own life. It could just be anyone, you know,
Mm-hmm.
people on TV, you know, just as a little girl watching certain things happen on television and seeing achievements happen, you know, in shows and sitcoms and things like that. You know, if I'm watching, you know, a show and mother and father are, you know, successful and their children achieve, and you know, just little things as a kid that you see that you're like, ooh, one day, you know, maybe I can
That
do
will be
that too.
me.
You know,
Right.
so those things are what made me. And then when I achieved one thing and saw that it was possible,
Mm-hmm.
then it's like, oh, you can't just stop there.
Right.
You
Right.
know? So then it's like, oh, you can do this, so maybe you can do this too. Maybe you
Mm-hmm.
can graduate. And with me, through high school, more so college was a problem for me because I would get sick a lot during my college years and have
Mm-hmm.
to redo a class or redo a semester of, you know, work or retake a couple classes. And back then we didn't have any like disabilities acts that was formed. There was none of that. So it was kind of like I'm begging every time in the guidance counselor office, like, listen, I have a disability. Can you please let me take this class over? You
Mm-hmm.
know, there was no like, nowadays it's protected. Now there's a whole form that you submit to the dean's office if you're at college. They are rolling out the red carpet if you're disabled. But back
Mm-hmm.
when I was going to school in the early 2000s, they were still trying to figure out how what to do with someone who, you know,
Has
has a disability. That it wasn't really something that they
remember
enforced.
now we are taking the this out. So someone who has
This
special abilities.
special abilities,
Yes.
exactly,
Yes.
superhuman
Yeah.
abilities. So
Mm-hmm.
with that, you know, I had to really be determined to do and not just say, oh, I'm just going to give up. You know, that's very hard with a lot of people who have special abilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very easy to get discouraged. Even in mental health, I'm sure there's a lot of people who get discouraged and feel like, why should I keep going? You
Mm-hmm.
know, what's the point? A lot of people who deal with, you know, some type of disease or special ability, they actually will end up having mental health issues
Mm-hmm.
because they will maybe fall on being depressed because they're depressed about the fact that they can't, you know, do what they want to do or
Sorry
they
to
or,
cut you, Melanie, but do
hmm
you also think that society also puts a lot of pressure on these people that had to what they're already carrying?
yes, yes. Society definitely creates an environment where if you're not, then what are you?
Mm-hmm.
I
That
think
is
in
very
most
important.
situations, stigma is half the battle.
Yeah,
Yes.
stigma is half the battle.
So, Zephyr, I'm going to come back to you, Mel. I had a question from one of my viewers here, Jennifer, because people have been sending in their comments, and let me just go to some of them. We have Joy Creed joining us from over there in Canada. Ashley Cashley's joining us from, I think, somewhere in the Carolinas. Jennifer Gray, she's right here in New Jersey. But oh, she wanted okay, so that question was for Darcy, but there's one here for you as well from Jennifer Zafir. I've seen that happen to many families where families start fighting. Okay, so that's not the one. I have a question here for you, Zephyr. Why does the system put children back into homes where the environment were not healthy for them in the first place?
That's a good question.
What
Because
a loaded question.
a lot of times, children have gone back into homes that they have actually been killed and hurt real
So
badly.
that's a great question.
Very good question.
Wish I had the answer. So
It's a
I guess
system.
all I can say on that front is working as part of the system.
Mm-hmm.
You're only one piece of the puzzle that has a say in what's happening to children. So I would represent, I guess in the role that maybe she's asking me,
Mm-hmm.
I was part of the Department of Health and Human Services. I worked for the children, and there's obviously other parties involved too. The children have their own counsel. Each
Mm-hmm.
parent has their own counsel.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a judge who is really the end all be all. So when it comes to some of these big hard decisions on what happens to these children, all the attorneys and lawyers, I mean, they present their case in the best way they know how to win for their client. And so oftentimes, at the end of the day, it's really in the judge's hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen a number of cases where maybe to me and to you and to any other person watching, it'd be a bad call to send a particular child home, but
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason,
It has been done.
the judge has a call that is different. And I don't know, I mean, I know that sometimes we've surmised that maybe that's the background of the judge, or there's a bias there, or there's something that's obviously playing a bigger role in the judge's
In the judge's
decision
head.
than the facts, because if it was just the facts, then it'd be
Mhm.
very clear what should happen.
Right.
Again, I hate to say it this way, but I think more often than not, the system does work the way that it's supposed to. Of course, you're not going to hear about those things in any kind of situation. The sensationalized stuff is going to be the awful things or the really good things. You don't hear the run-of-the-mill that goes right every day.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely situations that go completely south, and it's heartbreaking for all involved. I wish I had a good answer for why, other than
Have you ever
it's not in our
watched that?
hands.
Have you ever watched that movie Raising Isaiah?
No, I haven't.
Losing Isaiah.
Is it Losing
Losing
Isaiah?
Isaiah? Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Okay, so this is a story about a nurse who was working in a hospital, and a mother had a baby of color. This was a white person. Mother had a baby of color, and she dumped the baby, I think, behind the dumpster. Mel, you know the story.
it.
So this mother took the baby home, adopted the baby and everything. And then years later, after she had the baby, the mother turned up and wanted a child. So I mean,
Now the mother was on drugs. That's why
right,
that
dumped the
happened
baby,
to her.
right.
So now she's
And
like off drugs and ready to go
mhm.
and
And
wants
she
her child
wanted the
back.
baby, right. And eventually, the judge did grant her the baby, but she had to take the baby back home because that's the only family the baby knew. I mean, I remember at one point in the movie, I remember the older sister who was now a white teenage, so they went to this ball match and he was there cheering for her, and she was so embarrassed to have this little colored child calling her sister. So one point she went and she put her hand beside his and she was like, give me your hand. So they were showing hand to hand. And she was, what do you see? Showing him the hands. And
What's different?
all he could say is that your hand is bigger than mine. That's all he saw. So children
Children.
really, right. And that's how life should be. We should not be seeing life in colored and all of that. But let me ask you, Joseph. Um, Is foster care something that you would recommend to families? I mean, like someone out there who has the proper facility and, is willing to
Oh,
love a child and all of
oh
that. Would
my
you
goodness.
say that they foster children?
So, I mean, just speaking from experience,
Mhm.
the lack of foster families is astounding. Um, and so, yes, for those who have the emotional capacity
Mhm.
to be able to foster, absolutely. Um, I think that that's the key, though, right? I think there's a lot of stigma, or I think there's a lot of this idea that people do foster. Always been that kind of debate.
Mhm.
Um, and if you're doing foster care the right way, you ain't making no money. Those kids cost a hell of a lot more than what
And
you're
you're
getting
and you're
paid.
getting, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Um, so yes, I think that if you have room in your heart and if you have room in your home, there are so many um, children within whatever state I'm sure you're from, wherever you're watching, that um, are really going through it. And this pandemic is just it's going to be another influx of children who are coming into care. And so if that's a place where you feel God leads you, then I do think that that is an important need in the community that's not necessarily being fulfilled. I know that right now many are struggling, and so maybe that's not a reality. But I guess my message and my urge would be to really be um, to have that on your forefront as a way to give back to the community and as a way to really ensure that the next generation is getting more than we did.
It is the foster care is something that I have often thought about. But my drawback is, and I'm sure I had a friend in Connecticut and she was into foster care. And, there were some that came and she knows that those are going to go, but there are some that she really got connected to. And so the last set of kids that were practically plucked from her, she was so brokenhearted that she's like, no, I can't go through this again. And so for me, I am just afraid that I will take a baby, because if I'm going to foster, I will be fostering young children because I want
Mm-hmm.
them to grow with me and to learn my principles, teach them godly principles and stuff like that. And so I am scared that I will get attached to these kids and
You
then they're
will.
out of my arms. And I don't see myself
So
doing well with that.
I think you have to be, well, not you per se, but in general, I think people who are entering the world of foster care have to be very intentional with why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely different situations that play into your decision. I mean, sometimes it's, I've worked with couples who are unable to get pregnant. And so that is their kind of avenue into parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
And for situations like that, I imagine it would be extremely detrimental and extremely hard to kind of have children placed with you and then removed.
Mm-hmm.
For other people, they have no intention of keeping children. They want to be a safe haven for those during the time they need it, but not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily forever. And so I think you have to be very intentional and very transparent because you'll have, when going through the accreditation process, you have to be very transparent. And with why you're choosing this opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so with most home workers, I think that they know. I mean, if they know, if they know if Marcia is looking to have a baby, well, chances are they'll
She's going
hopefully
to want to keep this child.
exactly, and
Mm-hmm.
they're going to hopefully filter through those children who whose initial entry into the system may seem a bit harder than others in terms of going back home. They might
Right.
see a baby who was dropped off at a hospital. Parents, they have no idea who that is. That'd be a different scenario than somebody who, a
Mm-hmm.
3-year-old whose parents are fighting to get them back. That,
Right.
that might be something that they may not hand off to a parent who they know is looking for long term.
Right.
So I think it's a lot of it has to do with your expectations and why you're entering this world in the first place.
Mm-hmm. I remember because I work as a baby nurse. I remember I had a case wherein a couple called me in for a night duty, right? And I had gone to the family maybe about 2 weeks. And one day I got a call the evening, hysterically. They were like, they took him, Mercy, they took him. I mean, they had the child for about 2 weeks. And then for whatever happened, the parents decided that they wanted back the child. I don't know how that works legally, but they just came and got the child. And they were so brokenhearted. I think eventually they went overseas and adopted a older child. But can you imagine now you feel that, okay, fine, you have a baby and you went out and you did all this shopping, you have employed persons now, to come in to help you, to learn this whole new adventure. And then here it is, just like that, the snap of a finger, and that child is gone. That must be heart wrenching. But let me go back to some of the comments here. Maria Grant, is that name familiar to you, Melanie?
Yes.
That, that's actually Melanie's mom. She said, "Do you think judges are sometimes biased?" And you don't have to answer, Zephyr. You don't have to answer. Some things you just have to feel the truth, right?
That's a good question.
You don't
These
have to
loaded
answer.
questions.
Yes, that's a loaded question.
I think that judges are human.
Mm-hmm.
And as neutral as the job entails you to be,
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be a complete lie to say that we're not all full of some kind of bias, whether we know it or not, or whether we want to admit it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think during my time there may or may not have been a judge who lost her daughter to substance abuse. And so she had a different perspective when she saw parents who were struggling with substance abuse
Mm-hmm.
than maybe a different judge would have. So it's not, I guess there's still a bias, but I do think that there are things that people have been through that, whether they like it or not, affect their judgment, for better or worse. That
Yes.
might mean that she shows more grace to those who are struggling with substance abuse and give them more chances.
Mm-hmm.
Or on the other hand, it might mean that she is fed up with this substance abuse in the country and she is not risking one more baby back to a parent who is
Mm-hmm.
struggling with that. So for better or worse, I mean, it'd be a joke to say that their personal experiences and beliefs don't somehow affect their
Decision making.
decision making, for better or
Yeah.
worse.
And
Sometimes it's to the detriment of the child, and
yeah,
sometimes it's not. But I don't
yes.
think we can say that there are these completely neutral bodied people. They're not machines. They've all have feelings and emotions and experiences and their own trauma. So
And you see, you just touched on something very important because ever so often we don't think of the substance abusers and the persons who are suffering from alcoholism,
Mhm.
and those are, whether or not you know it, those are two silent killers right there
Mhm.
because very detrimental, you know. So Jennifer Gray says, congratulations that she's talking to you, Melanie, on you, the congratulations, Melanie Grant, congratulations.
Thank you.
You have accomplished so much with your disability during a time when there wasn't much in place for people with disabilities. Awesome. So,
Thank you.
Mel, you also touched, a while ago, on the fact that when you were in college, there were not much accommodation made for persons with, different ailments and all of that.
Yes.
Can you tell me, at your past university, were you a part of the body, that advocated for changes to come in place?
Um, at the time, no, because I was a lot younger, and
Mm-hmm,
I think in my 20s, I was so
mm-hmm,
focused on my own care that
mm-hmm,
I didn't. I think I still outside of school
mm-hmm.
was somewhat of a champion for people who had the disease, but I did not. Um, let's say
Advocate then.
advocate for change
Mm-hmm,
within the school.
mm-hmm,
The only way I was able to really make any effects of change was by leading by example.
mm-hmm,
So I did have people that would ask me, how did you do it? What did you do when I was starting to graduate, and they may have a son or daughter that had some form of ailment and wasn't able to maybe finish a class, or
mm-hmm,
maybe needed to retake a class but didn't know how to go about speaking
mm-hmm,
to these the guidance counselors, or the dean of students, in order to see what they can do for
mm-hmm,
assistance. So I would say, hey, well, this is what I was able to do.
mm-hmm,
I was able to, talk to my counselor, and then, escalate it to the dean of students, and, see what they can do. And maybe that's what you can do to try and see if you can get the same results. So
right.
I didn't you really affect change at my school. It
Mm-hmm,
was more so people asking me, what did I do, and me passing on the information, which came to that, like, each one teach one type of thing.
why did you start your advocacy group, and who are some of the persons who are a part of your group?
So I started in 2016.
Mm-hmm,
I Creating the organization was, I always say, it wasn't something that I just said, oh, I want to create an organization. I believe in God, and I believe that God appointed an assignment on my life.
mm-hmm,
So when I was going through my disease process, in a really rough time of me not understanding what my purpose was here in life,
mm-hmm,
it was important for me to connect with my higher source and try to really find out, well, what do you have me here for?
mm-hmm,
And it just so happened that the chain of events that happened from, those weeks, days leading up
mm-hmm,
to me deciding to create the organization,
mm-hmm,
it came to me without me really even physically creating it. The name came to me through just a quick discussion with me and my mom. It was just things started happening out of the blue. Funding came from places that we wouldn't expect, even creating the 501c3. It was a friend that I've had for years that I did not know that her family member was specialized in 501c3 development. And and I've known her for all of my life, practically since I was maybe 10 years old. And
mm-hmm,
she mentioned something to me as in the conversation, and it just was like, oh, if you want to do this, do you know that my cousin does this, is what he does for a living. I'm like,
mm-hmm.
what? And so God kind of created
Just
spaces
dropped everything line in line for you.
completely. So it was created in 2016. The name Patients with Patients of
Do you want
America.
to spell? Do you want to spell that for me so our listeners are
Y-
clear? I know, but for persons listening, can you
Yes.
just
So
spell and easily break that down?
patience. So the patience is PATIENCE, which
Mm-hmm.
is like have patience, and
Mm-hmm.
then with patience, the PATIENTS.
Right.
So it kind of gives you that, double entendre with the patience of
Right.
America, and it makes you think of what most patients want. Most people who do have any ailment, they want people to have patience with them.
Mm-hmm.
They want their providers to really, you know, give them a space where they can really just say, okay, how may I help you? And honestly, really go through the compassion part. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why Patients with Patients is what we're calling for. And that's really what the advocacy program calls for individuals and around the world. Whether you're a caregiver, whether you're a friend, whether you're, anyone that deals with someone or knows someone that has some type of special ability, which I love that. I'm going to say that all the time now.
Yeah, we should
Special
say that. We're
ability.
gonna change it. We're
It
gonna
is no
advocate.
longer
We're gonna
disability.
advocate for that name change. Yes,
Special
we're gonna work on that.
ability. I am
Yes.
using it forever. This is it. You created something with that.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
special ability, if you know somebody, we're just asking to have patience. And I was able to use the people who I knew in my life that were already in the healthcare field.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned it to my physician. My physician is one of the top physicians and doctors that treat sickle cell disease in adults at University of Miami. So
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Harrington was extremely hands-on with his patients, and he had that what we call je ne sais quoi, when you want to have a real doctor that really loves you and really cares about every single patient they come in contact with. So
Mm-hmm.
he, really loved the idea. He wanted to, do whatever he could to assist us in, the development. And my mom, Barbara, she was a key because she was already a nurse and she had a daughter that had the disease. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of times she was my advocate my whole life. And she taught me how to advocate for myself. And a lot of times when you're growing up, even if you have a mental health patient that's going through certain changes in their life as they get older and dealing with it differently as age increases, if you don't have somebody who's already advocating with you, for you, and then you learn how to do it for yourself as well. And with mental health is so different because it's like when you're in that zone of not being okay,
Mm-hmm.
you need somebody to really be patient with you, you know?
Zafar, can I ask, is there a mental health advocacy group that you work with in your capacity now?
Wow.
No.
No.
So here you have a task
Wow.
that you might want to.
That's a
This is
niche
an
right there.
assignment that we're throwing out to you. You can work with
Assignment for
Melanie.
real. Yeah.
I'm sure she'd be happy to work with you
That
and
would be
to,
amazing.
to put something together because people are depending on us not just to talk to today, but they need
To be
someone
the
who
difference.
understand their headspace, what they are going through, and who can work it through with them. I'm sure you're amazing at what you do, and your clients are, overjoyed to have you. But I think if people are able, people of like capacity, like mind, like
Mhm.
disabilities, everything are able to come together. Especially now that persons don't have to meet, we can do things via the medium that we're doing now. Technologically, however we want to do it, different platforms are available. Then I think this is something that I am putting myself out there for a lot of groups. But
Mhm.
I mean, when I first became interested in special education was when I was actually given a 4-year program to go and do human speciality, which is special education. And so I learned then that a lot of the little things that, especially being Jamaican, or people from the Caribbean, that we thought that certain things were not important because, you know, um, the child is complaining about high sight, or the child wants to always go to the blackboard to see, or the child always asking you to repeat, or just some simple little things that you're not thinking. The child may come every day and they're complaining about pains in the joints and whatever, but you're not seeing it for more than what it's worth. So
Once
I
work.
became aware of these things when I actually started that program, which unfortunately I did, what, like maybe 2 years, and I didn't finish because I migrated. But then it is something that I really want to pick up because it's a passion that I have. And so I'm not just doing these sessions
Session.
just to talk and then nothing comes of it. I'm actually following up with people and trying to see how and where I can become involved and become just one of those advocates who are going to go out there and work with either persons who are already in group, or to help them to form groups that will be better for them in the long run. But we are almost an hour and a half into this session, and I think we could go another hour and a half and still have scratched the surface. So, Zephyr, can I ask you, what are your closing? What, in the first place, did you answer that question? What made you go into your areas? Did you answer that question for me?
I don't think so.
No, you didn't.
Um,
So, in closing, you can tell us that and your closing remarks.
so I think it kind of ties together, right? I think that I was blessed with a rather uncomplicated, happy, for lack of a better word, upbringing. Um, and from a young age, I think I felt the sense of privilege in that. And in one way or another, recognizing that not everybody necessarily got that opportunity or that privilege. And so in doing, so from a young age, I felt an immense sense of responsibility to kind of do what I can to, in one way or another, level the playing field. So I think that is what drew me to my career, in trying to just keep families together one way or another, and trying to reunite and strengthen families. So I think that's what brought me to the field. I think my closing remarks would be, I think that all of us have some sense of, I think all of us come, I think for those who feel the same, I think for those, I mean, I am blown away by Melanie's stories, and where I think for some people it might kind of, special abilities like that sometimes can cause people, they have different reactions, right? So to see that Melanie kind of really picked herself up from her bootstraps and kind of became this advocate for other people in the midst of her own crisis, in the midst of her own battle. I think that if that was a more common thing to see, I think that a lot of people would be in a better place. It's up to those who have to help those who have not. And I think that's where I've come into this. Again, I was blessed with a privileged upbringing, and I don't mean that in the monetary sense, but in the emotional and supportive sense. And so who better than to turn and help those who weren't, for whatever reason, brought up with that kind of same abilities, whether that's a disability, whether that's whatever it is. I've just always found it in my heart and in my belief system to help those who have not. And so I think that would be my closing remarks. I think it sounds like we're all doing an amazing job in using kind of our testimony to further impact change, a positive change in people. So I think that the more that can be a case, the better off kind of as a society we become.
Amen. I like that. I like that analogy. They have.
We're only as strong as our weakest player, right? So the more
Yes.
we can kind of help those on the bottom, the higher we all can get.
Okay, so I have a notation from you here. The haves helping the have nots. Okay, I like that. So, Melanie, is your organization global one or is it just here in the United States?
Right now, it's flagship in the United States, but we are not, as far as support systems and finding, we provide phone support,
Mm-hmm.
and phone support can be provided anywhere around the world.
Mm-hmm.
We also help Jamaica, which
Mm-hmm.
is, there's a local unit in Jamaica that
Okay.
sometimes if they need, any type of, equipment or anything that they need as far as, to assist in better supporting the children and the adults who have the disease there. We try to do that when we can. If they request something from us, we try to
Mm-hmm.
make sure they have it. We work with a physician there in Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
He is the number one physician, Dr. Graham Sargent, in the world um, on sickle cell disease modalities, and
Mm-hmm.
he is basically shows how the world should treat the disease, and so they use his what do you call it?
Flagship.
They use his method in order to treat the disease, and so we work with him. He just requested some samples so that he can do some new research, and he needed something from us. We provided. So we try to help anybody around the world that needs help, with with the each one teach one, piggybacking from what I know to be true about that method is that when you are in a capacity and you have gotten to a level that you're able to manage whatever ailment you have and you do it as successfully as you can,
Mm-hmm.
it is very important to try to show somebody else how you did it, because people are more inclined to listen. If even with women who have children or going through the birthing process, they're asking each other, hey, what did you go through? Share,
Mm-hmm.
how did you do so even
What
little
was your
things like that.
experience
What was
like?
your experience? That
Yes.
is the easiest thing that you can transfer from one person to the next, that they would, people will listen and say, okay, I know the doctor said this, but we're all different. So they treat because they know that these are the methods to treat. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're talking about individuality and everybody being different and everybody having something specific
Different.
that helps them, that each one teach one thing is just everything. So our organization, Patients with Patients of America, like I spelled it, you www.patientswithpatients.org. If you spell the PATIENCE with patience, with the TS at the end, .org. If you go there, you'll see everything that we do. And on Instagram, same thing, Patients with Patients, PWP of America on Twitter. And that's basically it.
Question to you, because I know a little bit about, I know a whole lot about you.
Yeah.
I'm
From
involved
the
with
years.
you. Question to you is, I know that your organization yearly you would have like a fundraiser, but I know
Yes.
with COVID you've not been able to do that. Any plans that you are putting a virtual concert or something in place?
COVID has really hurt us. We
Yes.
had a massive gala 2017.
Mm-hmm.
2018, we were going to do it again. And then I got married. So we kind of said, okay, that year. We were just gonna wait.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden COVID hit, and it was like a lot of our organization implementing things. We have 7 people on the board. I have Ruth Duhaney, who is a nurse, over 38 years,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even longer, because she's been a nurse since Jamaica, right? As she did midwifery, and so she's
Mm-hmm.
our vice president.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've had, and we, these galas we
Who
have.
is your president?
Barbara right now is the
So
president.
how is it you're overlooking her?
Well,
I asked, that
Barbara,
was a deliberate
Miss
question.
Barbara Farron Grant, the nurse for over 30 something years, now 40 years
Right.
probably. She's
Mm-hmm.
the president currently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm founder and CEO. And then we have a we have an accountant who serves as, he's a family friend, but he definitely knows everything about how it is to have people in his family, and people who he sees on the street that deals with sickle cell. So he has compassion for the disease and other diseases that that people have. And
Mm-hmm.
also and that's Mr. Norman Loban. And then we also have um, a, a mother of a son, and her ex-husband had sickle cell beta thalassemia, which is another derivative of the disease.
Mm-hmm.
That there's maybe 5 or 6 main
Variance.
variants of the strand of the sickle cell disease,
Mm-hmm.
and her ex-husband dealt with it. So her son luckily did not come out with the disease, because both parents usually have to have the trait for you
Right.
to have
Right. To
it.
be full blown.
So, but she has dealt with having a husband, and
Mm-hmm.
dealing with that as well. If you're, your lover, your husband, having that disease, going through the hospital and going through things that you normally wouldn't think you would get into. Once you love somebody, you can't control who you love, and not know that they're going through something so traumatic that they've been dealing with all their life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's her perspective, and she's an auditor in her normal life. Her name is Manishka Huey, and
What's the
then
name?
Manishka Hewing. And we call her Nishka because it's like, because we shorten her name, but it's Manishka. Manishka,
Mm-hmm.
Manishka Hewing. And she basically lends that side of our organization. And lastly, our of course our doctor, which is our Dr. Thomas
Yeah.
Harrington.
Yeah.
He's our CMO, our Chief Medical Officer.
Okay, so let me go back to the question. Is there any plans for you to do like
So
a
this
virtual
gala
event this
now,
year?
2021. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. 2021 this year is almost done. I thought we just didn't we just get into 2021.
Mm-hmm. But we're already 5 months in,
Well, we're
almost six
always
months.
already 5 months in. So,
Mm-hmm.
if we do a gala, it would have to be some form of virtual
Mm-hmm.
event.
Mm-hmm.
We're not ready to actually get into a venue space just yet.
Right.
With COVID, there's restrictions on a couple of people, how
Mm-hmm.
many you can have. So, if I was to plan some type of virtual event, it'll probably have to be a Zoom or some type of live show. Right now, I have a Let's Talk About It TV where I talk to different patients that are dealing with the disease.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as doing a gala, I may have to, if I'm going to do it, I probably have to plan for 2022.
And also, let me just remind our viewers, let me just tell our viewers who are watching that not only is Melanie the founder of Patient with Patients, but she is also an event planner.
Oh God.
She is also
So,
she's also an entrepreneur. She has many different businesses going,
yeah.
and so who better to guide and to funnel this virtual concert that I am prodding her into doing now
I know. I see.
than
Listen,
her.
you have me on 2 things already. Okay, I need some mental health advocates, and I need.
She, she's right.
I'm penning this down.
You're going to be wearing a lot more hats.
A lot more
Yes,
hats. Oh
yes,
Lord.
yes. Both of you together. And
Definitely.
so, is there any last word you want to tell me? I know you wanted to, I just want to, on your behalf, just express gratitude to the team, the executive team that you have working with.
Very, very good.
Number one amongst that is, I know you mentioned your mother a whole lot, but
Yes.
number two is also your dad, because there's always one on the
Yes.
left, one on the right, or
Dad is
one on both
always
sides.
supportive. Definitely.
I know that there are a lot of people who have support system, and it's very important. For those of you who don't have, that is why we want to go more into advocacy
Advocacy.
groups, that we can help you and be there as your support system.
Hmm,
So
hmm.
for persons who are watching Melanie, who would say, okay, this sounds like an amazing organization. How can I make a contribution towards you? What would be a recommendation? Would it be going to your website? What would you advise them to do? Because I'm
Yeah,
sure there may be persons who want to reach out to say whether even a donation, big or small.
that is the best way. Honestly, unfortunately, we had a family member that passed away, my mother's uncle, and he was an exceptional man. I can't I can't tell you how his spirit alone entering a room.
Mhm.
We call him Uncle Pansy, right? But Uncle Pansy was the most
That was
amazing
earlier
person.
on this month or late
Yes,
last month. Yeah.
yes, and in his
Hmm.
honor, a lot of people donated to
Hmm.
the organization, and the best way to honestly donate, which goes directly back to assisting, the patients, because what we do is we're providing phone support. We're also building a class. We have already built a webinar, that we're going to have another session of the webinar. Just because of COVID, a lot of things died down, but we need
Hmm.
to have another session of the webinar so that people can get certified to be an advocate. It doesn't matter if you don't have sickle cell or you don't have an ailment of any kind. If you are interested in lending yourself
Hmm.
to, whether it is phone support, emotional support, being able to have somebody just talk to you, and we teach you the chain of command in the hospital. We teach you, how to help that patient go through what it takes so that they can in turn be their own advocate.
Hmm.
Those are the tools that we teach you in our webinar, and that's what the money goes into, creating those webinars, creating the avenues so that we can effectively advocate for those patients. So it would just easily just go to the website, patientswithpatients.org, and click on the donate link, and it goes straight to PayPal. It's used through PayPal, so you can PayPal $10, $5, whatever you want, $1. It doesn't matter. We take anything.
Thank you so very much. And thank you so much, Zafar, for being with
Thank you
us
for having us.
throughout this
Thank you.
entire process. I hope we did not bore you.
I know.
We learned a
Magnificent.
lot from you. And definitely, if you, I'm going to ask you when, I'm going to end the broadcast shortly, and then you can stay on and you can exchange number. But
Yes, I
before
need
we
to.
go, I just want to thank Andre in her absent. I know she traveled today all the way from
Thank you,
Florida back
information.
into New York, where she lives, where she
Mm-hmm.
resides, both places.
Both places.
Right. So I knew she traveled today. So when she actually reached out to me this afternoon to ask me what time and to say she's gonna be coming on and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
I really want to thank her, for being there. Unfortunately, we missed her along the way, but I mean, the information she gave us, it
Amazing.
was short but amazing. And I know I can always reach out to her at any time for additional information so I can pass on to anybody who might have a question. To Darcy Thompson, our attorney, who was here talking to us about our living will directives, and just how important it is to make your will, to do living will, to do advanced directives, and all of that. We just want to say thanks. Mel, Zeph, thank you so much. I'm going to
Thank
be ending
you.
this broadcast now. I'm coming back to you guys. Facebook Land, thank you so much for joining me another week. As I say on this program, we seek to educate, we seek to inform, but at the end of it all, our aim is that we will leave you inspired better than you came. Until next week, when we touch another topic, this is Marcia Harris with Sia's Bite and a Mouthful, thanking you once again for tuning in. Have a blessed night.